Bernece Hoover in Richmond, Indiana. And this is Carol Magee interviewing. So we're ready to begin. You're a fourth generation Universalist. You grew up in Muncie's church then? Or?
No, Eldorado and Eaton, Ohio.
Eldorado and Eaton, Ohio. And Eldorado is still going.
Yes.
Yes.
Very much.
Mm-hmm.
And I was interested in hearing our minister speak of
You only take yours every 4 years.
it was so influential in your church early.
But I have to take mine.
He founded the Eldorado Church
Okay.
in Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so interested in reading about it, I brought the article home. And it said he was trying to get to Dayton from, of course he either went by foot or by horseback or train if possible. So those were early days. Guthrie's who I'm trying to think about.
Talking about Guthrie.
Yes. And in this particular incident, he could not reach there by train. He walked about 20 miles by foot, rode some by horseback, and he had bought a white silk tall hat to look very distinctive that day. Just a regular plug hat. And you can imagine what that looked like because it rained all the way when he was out walking.
I wonder if you can give me some dates, general dates that might have been.
Well, I was 13 years old. I know that because my grandmother took me down the aisle, held me by the hand when I joined the church.
Sometimes she's hard to get around.
So that would have been early, well, I don't know what year that might have been then, or about what year.
No, well,
Promenade, you know, right down through. Yeah, we go
oh, I
around
didn't mean
the east and around the west. We get any place. Yeah.
When you grow up with that and you see that happening, you don't worry about it.
to.
Okay, so that would have been 69 years ago, you're saying?
Well, we
Okay.
went up to Muncie after they moved. You remember the old church up on Madison?
So that's about 1912. I've
We
done
didn't
my
have a
arithmetic.
couple right in 35 to Madison. Then when they moved out to.
That's a big help for me because then that puts us in.
Yes, that would be correct because I was 7 years old when my mother died and we lived in Eaton at that time. Then I went to live with his grandmother at Eldorado.
Okay.
And that was just about the date that would be
Down
like
Madison.
sure.
It was still the days of horses before World War
Church
I.
was, used to walk beyond and then turn west.
Lawrence, she has a recorder on here and I can't do anything
Okay.
while you're talking. Your voice is so heavy. Now,
Used to go to Ball State. Get out there.
So your grandmother was already attending Eldorado.
oh yes, she was a member of the first church that was built there.
First church of Eldorado.
And that was down by the old sawmill.
Mm.
And it was just a wooden church, just made of lumber, the whole church.
Mm.
And I have in my possession, given to me by an uncle, the first communion bottle that they used. And it was a common cup. They stood at the end of the aisle, filled the cup, passed the cup down the row of people, and everybody sipped from the common cup.
Mm.
And I have the bottle in my possession.
That's something pretty important, very helpful for the district to know about. I know of Eldorado largely because I've been involved in district activities the last few years.
Yes, she would. And Reverend Michael, of course, is
Yes.
the minister there. And I used to see him frequently here in Richmond because they belong to the Civic Theater and we used to attend too. And I have some other things that are of interest from the old Boston church, which is not very far from Richmond. And it was a very lovely brick church, and in fact, they didn't tear it completely down because it's now a furniture store. And I have the contents of the cornerstone. And I have had that on display at different places. Well, the Bible is too large now for me to carry around because it was quite large. The one that was used on the pulpit. And then I have a copy of the first newspaper that was printed by the church in this part of the country, down in Cincinnati.
Okay, I wonder whether that would have been First Church of Cincinnati.
No, it wasn't any particular church that was doing it, I don't think. It was something of the West, Message of the West or something like that. We were way out west in those days. But I do have those and some other things. I'll bring them up to Muncie some Sunday, and they can just put them on display on the coffee table.
I wonder when you first began to attend Muncie's church.
Well, I was telling the minister when he was here that I became interested in the Muncie church because I was on the board of the women's organization, and also because once Reverend McDavid asked me to go as a delegate to the convention. And he said, since you are from this area and there is no one going from our church, I just wonder if you would be interested. And I said, yes, I would. Well, they challenged my vote because I was actually a member from the Ohio Church, see, at Eldorado. And so I was with the minister, and he and I constituted the Indiana delegation, you see. And, well, I just made up my mind then and there that as soon as I came home, I was having my membership transferred from Ohio. Because I was working in Indiana, there was no reason why I shouldn't, except that still it wasn't my home place. And that gave me problems when I would go various places, whether I was to vote as a delegate from Richmond Fellowship or from the Muncie Church. And I always would write down both.
I lost one when it might have been you became a member of Muncie.
Well, I'm almost a 50-year member.
Almost a 50-year member. Okay, so that's about 1930, between 1931 and 1935.
Right along in there.
And you were going to, well, what we now call General Assemblies, and
Yes.
they were called something else.
They call it the Universalist Church of America.
You mentioned earlier you had been active in the women's group there at Muncie, and that was called Alliance?
No, AUW. Now this would give you the Association of Universalist Women, and they were first organized in 1869. And well, Indiana actually organized in 1900 the women's AUW. And course, at that time, all the women at Muncie were Association of Universalist Women. And they organized with the same idea that they had organized nationally. Nationally, they had organized to raise money for the church. It was their centennial, and it was called the, it was the 100th commemorating John Murray Fund in honor of the great liberal preacher. And so they were trying to raise $200,000. And the women pledged $100,000. And they had no difficulty raising it at all, just by volunteer contributions and pledges. And so the following year, they decided if they could do that much for the church, they could have a women's organization and be autonomous and raise their funds that way and develop their own programs and projects.
Now this was Muncie?
No, this is, as I say, it was a similar reason that the women of Indiana decided to organize, because the women nationally, when they organized, were the first the first church women's organization in America. And then 2 years later, to make it all legal, they obtained a charter from Washington, D.C. And that's why we had problems when we disbanded then, or merged. We didn't disband. We merged into the group that is now the UU Women's Fellowship. And so in order to dispose of our property in Japan and all these various other holdings that we had to be released from this charter and what it stated, so that we would free our funds to use as we now saw fit and necessary. Well, I don't know if the Indiana women had so much that that entered into it. They just simply had come to the point where they wanted to have a state organization.
It sounds as if there were many Universalist women in the state then.
Yes, there were. And I can tell you the names of some of the smaller towns. Well, it finally developed, and it's now known that we had in the late 1800s and early 1900s 44 churches in the state. And 14 of those had their own ministers, and all of them had Sunday school. Whether they were rural or urban.
Now, I live in Anderson, and I'm wondering if Anderson had a church.
Yes, they
at
did.
that time. They did.
And it was very interesting about Anderson, too. Their women's organization at least didn't last too long, but what is very interesting, I think, and worthwhile, is the fact that many of these women's organizations remained active and lived on far beyond the time that their church closed.
That's very interesting.
I thought that was very significant, and it was because we had a program that was well worthwhile. And we had projects that they were all interested in seeing developed.
Were they still made centering around money raising, or had they expanded from that?
Well, they expanded. As I say, we had Blackburn Home in Japan that we were very interested in, and then we opened up the way for kindergartens there. And the Ohio women were so interested in this portion of the program that they wanted to be responsible for one kindergarten themselves, and they wanted to call it Ohio, which means good morning.
Oh.
And so they did. It was always called the Ohio Kindergarten. And well, the home that we sponsored there, the Blackburn home, was finally given to us by Mr. Blackmer, and he had the finances to do it. And they wanted to take the geisha girls off the streets. They had no place to go to earn money, just walk the streets as a geisha. And so many of them came into this home, the Blackburn home, and we were responsible for their education and training. And then they went out as teachers to train. So that was a very worthwhile cause too.
This would have been during the 30s, 40s. Another.
Oh, that's one.
Okay, that's in the article. It's
Yes.
available in print.
And you'll have, it'll be precise and right that way.
Fine.
And then we were, well, the Muncie women were very interested in the, after we did form state organizations and then forming local groups, they were very interested in the work at North Carolina. In fact, so much so that the Wallaces, who then owned the piano that was used at the church, contributed it to the work in North Carolina. And Inman's Chapel, it was called. Inman's Chapel.
Inman's Chapel.
And there was a minister there named Hannah Powell, and she distributed clothing, and we sent books to her, and she opened up a library, and it was the only library for children and adults in that part of the country. And
I wonder if that was a rural area, part of North Carolina.
it's a mountain area.
Mountain area. West.
And then we later opened up a cabin where we had a health program to teach the mothers how to properly take care of children. And, well, just health care is what it was.
This would have been during what decade then in the life of the Muncie Church? The 30s? Did it come later or earlier, do you remember?
That's in here too.
I have heard of, yes, at the top of page 11, after 20 exciting years of service, the association phased out its program in North Carolina. Yes, this is a nice account on paper here. In 1911, the North Carolina State Convention requested Women's National Missionary Association to assume superintending that state's program. That's
Yes,
ties in
that's
there.
one. And I wondered if this Mrs. Hoover or in your church is any relation to the Ulrichs who were in North Carolina, where we developed several churches, and they were one place in North Carolina.
So the Muncie women then met to help raise some monies that went to support the national programs.
Well, it finally developed, at least when I was president. We were asked to accept a quota, a portion of what the national stated would be needed, basically for this particular project. And then it was expected that each state would do her share. But from the very beginning, our organization has been a non-dues, delegate organization. And so all the money that we ever raised for any project was voluntary.
Right.
We were never told you must do this, or this is what you're expected to do. But,
And I'm impressed with the amount of money raising the women.
well,
successfully
when I look
carried
back
out.
and think of what we raised, all of the money that was raised for the Clara Barton camp, and we bought the Clara Barton birthplace, home site, and all of this work in North Carolina, in Japan, and our neighborhood house. That was our work among colored people in the South. And Reverend Jordan was the first Negro minister. And we were asked at the National Convention one year to take over the complete direction and financial responsibility of the Jordan Neighborhood House, and we did. But later, when the merger was coming about, we did it only partially. We accepted part of the responsibility, and the service committee accepted the rest. So that, in fact, we actually turned our money over to the service committee. And the service committee then took over the direction of the project there.
I wonder what it's like to you to see UUWF continuing to support.
No, they are
maintaining
not.
The Clara Barton.
And you
camp.
see, we never owe the Clara Barton, yes they are. But none of these other projects are they continuing to support. And, well, we built several churches at Little Rock, North Carolina, and then Outlaws Bridge. And that's where the Ulrichs were, and that was the reason I have been interested. Now there's Becky Ulrich, who is the wife, that has been on our national board and has served in some capacity at the Clara Barton camp for a period of time.
Oh, thank you.
That's just a list of
List
the
of
churches.
Mid-1800s to the early 1900s, yes. And the starred ones are the largest churches built in the early 20th century?
No, in the early
in
years.
Indiana. Mhm.
In Indiana.
Okay.
And all of those are still very active, except Indianapolis and Logansport.
Mm-hmm.
And Logansport was a nice, fine, big church. I used to enjoy going to conventions there.
Mm.
But The last one was in, I would say, 1925.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, we just don't know what happened, except the minister said he just was not making a good living there. And he was selling clothing, belonged to the Kiwanis Club, and he seemed to feel that he just had outgrown the church somehow, or it wasn't meeting his, he just wasn't satisfied being a minister any longer, I guess, because he just left the ministry and he left Logansport, and there has never been another minister there, and to my knowledge, the church is closed, probably disposed of.
Quite possibly. I wonder what it was like for you to experience the merger. It was 60? 1960, was it? 61. So many people having come into UUism since then, of course, are not in touch with the experiencing of the merger of the two organizations.
Remember Winchester High School band? Have you heard of that? How good they are?
Well, I think that was in 63, but now it started actually, we started talking about it at the convention in San Francisco. And that is when we really talked in earnest about it. We were moving toward it. That's how I happened to write that article.
And so the San Francisco convention was before 1963, isn't it?
Yes. I would say it was about, probably 56 to 59, along in there.
I don't know whether to what degree the women were, of the two groups, the Universalists and the Unitarians, were somewhat friendly or found that they could handle the merger, or whether...
Well, I think that everyone was hoping that it would just simply make a larger denomination. There were so many similarities. There were a lot of differences. And there are a lot of differences, I think, today in people's beliefs, individual beliefs. Some are more theistic than others. And so they're probably the ones that are still a bit unhappy about the merger. But as such, I think it was expected that we would, having all these similarities, would grow. But I think we have found now in the last few years that it has been very disappointing in that respect.
The growth that was hoped for has not happened.
And it has not happened. But I still think that it will, when the differences are, when we more thoroughly understand. There are just individual differences that will have to be resolved.
I wondered if what you had said earlier indicates that people who had a theistic inclination then felt as though they lost something in the course of the merger.
Well, that would be my thinking on that. I have a complete folder on the merger, but I didn't even go into that because I didn't know actually what you were going to, whether you wanted something about the early.
Well, it occurs to me that there are so many areas that we can ask about that would supplement the the written history, and we can find written histories of, say, the merger, but it's always very helpful to have an individual's point of view around that experience.
I know I was appointed chairman of the ad hoc committee that was to study this and how to approach it, and I followed through until it was accomplished.
These were 1963 then. This was largely around the women's.
That was when we were planning the merger, and the first meeting was at the Eldorado Church in conjunction with our state annual meeting. And the women's, it was at that time called the Association of Universalist Women. You see the name change from Centenary Association. Well, 3 times we changed names. And each time to more correctly define what we were most interested in. For a while it was just missionary, getting tracts distributed in railroad stations and public places. And we had a traveling library which was available from Boston.
This was at the time of the merger?
No, this was at the beginning of the AUW.
Okay.
And then I'm telling you this because, as I say, we changed names 3 times in order to more correctly describe the thing that we were doing. It was first the Women's Centenary Association, and then it was the Women's National Missionary Association. Then it was finally the Association of Universalist Women. And always the purpose was to bring together the woman power of the Universalist Church. Well, that's what the merger was all about, to bring about the woman power of the 2 churches. Now, the Universalist women, the setup had always been with the church that we created an organization to assist the church, but the Unitarian Alliance was a part of the church and received funds from that. Whatever went into their budget, they received funds from. I think it was something like $20,000 a year. And the Universalist women, as I say, all their money was voluntary. And whenever they needed money, they just had a special way of going about raising it. And they always came up with it. And whether it was to buy a link of a chain, or whether it was just something to make a pledge.
I see here in your notes from the fall of '64 that the group that met at Oakland and
It was just the
later,
Indianapolis women.
that was the Indianapolis. That the group then that met in the fall voted to merge the Alliance and the AUW groups at the state or Ohio Valley Council level, and then that group adopted the name of OVUUW, Ohio Valley Unitarian Universalist Women. And that's very interesting to me because I've been treasurer, I'm outgoing treasurer of that group.
Well, you are?
Yes, so it's very interesting to me then to talk with a founder.
So,
I'm wondering though if in Indiana you had very many Unitarians to join up with.
No, we didn't. And the only ones we had to work with were from the church in Indianapolis, yes.
And
And
All Souls.
also, yes. And the minister's wife is the one that really headed that. And then I suggested that we have a few meetings with the people, some officers of the Ohio Valley organization. And so that was Eleanor Artman and the president of their organization, some women from Kentucky, Louisville, and I invited them here to my home, and we had a luncheon, and we talked this over. And then I would go down there, and it was just back and forth several times before we ironed out the essentials of bringing these two groups together. And that was our beginning.
Yes.
And then when we were settled in our own minds that we had come successfully to the point of merging, why we went to our separate conventions, prepared to cast our vote. And that's what we did at San Francisco.
Nice.
That is the Universalist.
Yes.
And the Alliance, and wherever they met that year, did the same thing. So then when the whole group came together, a church, as a church, I think it was in probably 65. That's when they voted for the merger, the entire merger of the two churches and their women's groups, their auxiliary groups.
So you've had a great deal then to do with national AUW and the merger, and you've talked with other women in the district and have been very much involved with other churches.
I've been on the board, you see. I was on the national board. I was a vice president. And then I was state president. And we were always very close with the women in Ohio. In fact, they have come frequently to our conventions, and we have gone to theirs, and I have spoken at their convention many times, their state convention. And especially when we would have women from the national board as guest speaker, because I was interested in hearing them.
I'm wondering, while you were involved in these national activities, what things were like on the local fronts. Whether your having been on the national board encouraged women in, say, Muncie or Eldorado to run a strong women's group, or whether...
Well, I think so, because they all did for many, many years, until after the merger, it just seemed to make a change.
Yeah. Wonder what kind of change. It was difficult for me to learn from other women I talked with exactly how or why alliance meetings seemed to fall off. They had a hard time pinpointing it.
Well,
maybe you could help us.
I would say the AUW the same way, because they didn't have the same program. Their programming is entirely different. Their thoughts seem to be along a different, the emphasis seems to be along a different line. And so whether we just haven't come around to it yet, and then so many issues have come up that I think people have their own thinking on. But particularly the camps, so much money, $250,000 was turned over by the association in the merger to the Women's Fund. and we had a fund specifically for the camps. And so we were wondering, we have wondered, what has gone wrong with the use of that fund, that we just don't have enough to properly operate the camps anymore. You see, we used to have a life membership too. In fact, I was a life member. And Indiana, when it was a state convention, the women even bought a seal to put on their certificates from Indiana when they became a life member. And we had 8 women that I know of, and I'm sure many more. But this was quite a new thing. But you could be a patron member for $100 or just a life member at $25. And so we were just beginning to work on that when the merger came into being.
And the merged group did not come up with life memberships.
No, they don't even honor, they wouldn't even honor those of us who were life members.
I see.
And neither do they have memorial memberships. And we had a lot of women in the state for many years had been sending memorial memberships to the national in honor of Indiana women who died. I know of one specifically that was $300 he sent for Ida Downer when she died, because she and her sister, Minnie Lyser, were very, very strong, influential Universalists and very strong supporters of the women's group. And in fact, Mrs. Lyser was at one time president of the state. So, and I was for years and years and years and years. And you were speaking of, was I influential? I hate to say this, but I do know that people have said that I had to have something that kept the women of Richmond going 50 years.
Yes.
And we hadn't had a church here for many, many years. But our circle, mission circle we call it, although it was AUW, we still called it the mission circle. Even Muncie called different groups circles.
Yeah.
And I think they still do refer to it in that manner.
Yeah.
It just sort of differentiates you from some other circle. To say you're the mission circle, and another one will say, well, we're another circle, we do this. And they have a special project of their own. And I know there were 4 or 5, at least, groups at Muncie. There was one that was called a sewing circle, and the lady's name was Gray. Now, whatever her first name was, I don't know. But there was a sewing circle, and then there was the Carol Martin Guild, and the one I belong to now, Service Women's Group. And there was a night and a daytime group of that. And the night group was the younger women, and some of them were employed, of course. Not so much so then as they would be now, but nevertheless they could come better at night. But well, Jane Whitlock, Betty Derman, Dorothy Newt, and oh, I would say Clarissa Schreiber, and some of those were of the evening service league. But once a month, they always tried to meet together and have a special program. And it was a very, very fine program. We had a yearbook at the time that was put out by National. And it gave many, many suggestions. It didn't tell you that this is what you must present as a program, but it gave suggestions of many programs. And then the group could develop their own program and yet stay within the yearbook suggestion. And I think it was something that helped hold us together because we were doing similar or same things, you see. However, it could be done in a way that applied best or would get the best results and be more interesting to your own group. And I think the highlight of our state organization was when we celebrated our 60th anniversary. And that was very well attended. These were...
You're looking now at the names of the women who attended that?
Yes, and there are some there that...
Oh, yes, all divided by church.
That you wouldn't remember probably because they are now dead. So many are deceased, are in nursing homes.
Mrs. Caroline Black, we are, one of our women is planning to talk with Caroline Black.
Oh, she would be a wonderful one to talk to because she was always so very interested and outstanding.
Jane Whitlock is both interested in talking to record some history, and she's also willing to be interviewed too.
Yes, well, that's great.
Betty Derman, we were talking with. Dorothy Newt, I see, and I've worked with on the finance committee. Z. Mitchell, Mrs. William R. Is that Z. Mitchell?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm talking with her.
Yes, those were all the old timers, you know. And they were very, very faithful. They were there every month. And I went to Carolyn Black's house one night. I went from Oak Landing, where I had organized the Carol Martin Guild. At that time, we were organizing guilds to help secure the work at the Tara Barton camp. And so I went to Tara Barton, Oak Landing, and organized a guild there. Then I met the field worker, Mrs. Susan Andrews, Miss Susan Andrews it was, from National Headquarters. She was visiting around in the state also. But she went with me to this meeting at Carolyn Black's. And we organized the Tara Barton Guild at Carolyn Black's home. So she was always so generous to not only use her home, but I think you know that she gives us, or did when she was able, gave this luncheon once a year for all Universalist women in the state who were officers and are interested, very interested in the program. And of course, the women of the Muncie Church. So we always look forward to that in February. But this particular year, when it was time for us to celebrate our 60th anniversary, having organized in 1900, well, we did. And as I say, it was really, really quite an occasion. It was May the 22nd. We had made a practice. I think it was started really by one of the Muncie women, Maud Caldwell, was on the national board prior to my being on it. And then there was a lady named either Wood Leslie or Leslie Wood. I just don't know. It sounds as though it should be Mrs. Leslie Wood, doesn't it? Well, she was interested in having the ladies come to her house and having just a luncheon for them. And she just set tables around, and we sat around and had a little program and visited and just had delightful fellowship. And so that was the beginning of our May fellowships. May fellowship celebration. And every May we got together at Indianapolis, Muncie. They came to Richmond once and we went out to the park. And of course we were hostesses and added substantially to the food, you see, and just took care of all the arrangements for that. But we had members from Muncie, Indianapolis, and Oakland, and it just finally grew into a very lovely affair. And it was highlighted then with the 60th anniversary.
I'm wondering what some of the ways in which the groups earned money. It's an impressive undertaking in many years that you've earned a great deal of money that you've turned over to Clara Barton and the other projects. What were some of the ways, though, in which you earned the money?
Well, one thing I remember is we had one year, we always had a national chairman, and regardless of who she was, always came up with a very great idea. And one year, it was a chain, and you were to buy a length of the chain. And then they sent you a little gold paper chain. And then when the money was to be raised to purchase the Clara Barton camp, it was Marietta B. Wilkins who had the idea then to raise money, and we just did it by pledge. Then when we were 50 years old nationally, we celebrated the 50th year, and I think that's the year that we had this link, sold the gold links, because it was our golden anniversaries. And they always, with the exception of one time, I think they were just a few dollars short of the hundreds of thousands they'd start out to raise.
And I'm wondering
But
whether
it was all volunteer. Everything was voluntarily given.
I'm wondering then whether money was raised perhaps by a woman setting aside some personal money of her own, or whether money was raised as often by maybe a church affair or a community kind of bazaar, or both, or neither.
Just whatever, however you felt best, it could be handled locally. As I say, there were 2 or 3 times when I had a national impetus, and we were to all do the same thing. And through the year, we all had what you call missionary boxes, and we kept putting money into that. And then we had the Clara Barton stockings and the oranges. The oranges were for the boys' camp, and the stockings for the Clara Barton camp. And we filled those. And
You filled the Clara Barton stockings with what?
well, actually, we filled it till it, we've used dimes, but when we got a dime's worth, we always put in $1 and took out the dimes because you couldn't mail heavy money, you see. And then we fill the other side of the stocking and do the same thing. Well, that was always a couple dollars from every Universalist woman, and most everybody just added a little bit more when Christmas time came. But they all had an in-gathering service. Nobody failed to have the Christmas in-gathering service.
An in-gathering service. And
that was to turn in this money that you had collected for the camp.
Okay.
And then that was all sent to Nashville. And it was quite a sizable sum.
And that was a regular Sunday service?
No, it was just whenever your circle would meet.
I see. And that was something you did then in December.
But we could ask our husbands for a contribution, you see, and of course many of them did, and sent in large sums of money.
And Claire Barton has been the project now for many years.
1921.
1921.
That's when
So 60 years now.
yes, that's when well, it was bought with the intention of perpetuating her memory and also to open there in her memory something that would benefit human beings, particularly children. And so it was going to be just a camp until Dr. Jocelyn approached and said, why not make this a medical camp and give diabetic children the opportunity to have a place to go camping as well as a place to doctor. So it became a medical camp, the first of its kind in the world.
I wonder if you know any children who went to the camp.
I don't know any personally, but I do know that there is one boy whose parents were quite wealthy, who came from South America about 7 years in succession. I do know that. And as to say that I know anyone personally, I do not, but I did tell my doctor about it here and told him to tell other doctors. And they did the same thing at Muncie. And through Dr. Clevenger, I think that they were able to send, or at least refer some people, so that they could send their children to the camp and refer the people to the camp. And we were constantly giving out literature and mailing literature. And I even took the literature up and left it on my doctor's table in the office. And I think I also left some on the table at the YWCA. After all, that's the way you advertise, you know. And then I went to over to Erland to see if we could put in their library or have available someplace near the library for our Christian leader, it was called at that time. And they gave us permission, and so did they at the YMCA and the YWCA. So that's the way you advertise who you are and what you are doing.
Probably got time for maybe a quick question, and my last one is, I wonder whether you have attended any of the annual meetings of the Ohio Valley UU Women.
Yes, I have. I attended all of them when I was able to go. I'm just not able to. As short as I would say possibly 5 years since I have been able to go. I had had the stroke when I went to the first one, but I progressively have gotten worse. And so by needing help in dressing and all that sort of thing, I just couldn't go in someone's home and travel that much. So I still maintained an interest, and I paid my dues up until about 3 or 4 years ago. I would say about 3 years ago. So now I just feel like they are so well established that they can get along very well on their own.
What's it like to see a group then that you think is well established in that?